when the war in Iran kicked off last week, there was a widespread assumption that, however...
So I want to watch this for my own sake. Why a U.S. ground invasion looks increasingly likely. I'm admitting to my bias here. I hope we engage in a ground invasion because I want us to lose. I think that the world is ending, the end times are upon us, and I think that the only hope is a reminder to the American and Israeli ruling classes that they are not literally gods and they can't do anything that they want. You know, I need them to be humbled. Not for prideful reasons. I just think the consequence of their arrogance is basically like the end of life as we know it on Earth. So
it went, the US would not be putting boots on the ground. Not only would a ground invasion risk turning what Trump apparently originally envisioned as a quick Venezuela-style decapitation into a prolonged Afghanistan-style quagmire, but it would also be incredibly politically risky, given that Trump campaigned against so-called forever wars and has done very little proverbial pitch rolling. However, on Monday, Trump opened the door to the possibility, telling the New York Post that apparently, unlike his predecessors, quote, "I don't have the yips with respect to boots on the ground." And his war secretary, Pete Hegseth, also refused...
Such an old guy way of saying that, man.
...to rule it out at a press conference at about the same time. So in this video, we thought we'd do our best to explain why a ground invasion looks at least more likely than it did a week or so ago, and ask whether it would be a good idea. If you've read George Orwell's 1984, you might remember the book's three powerful superstates, covering today's US, Russia, and China. In the latest issue of our magazine, we're considering how these Orwellian spheres of influence are taking shape, and whether
whoa! Why the fuck are you including the border around the United Kingdom? The United Kingdom, they're part of Oceania. Fake fan.
We're considering how these Orwellian spheres of influence are taking shape, and whether we're entering a new age of empires. That's just one of the 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long Than You'd Expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link. Trump's two preferred outcomes, the first being a Venezuela-style outcome, where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is succeeded by a relatively pragmatic regime insider who's more keen on doing a deal, and the second being regime change via a popular protest, looked less likely than they did last week. On the question of a Venezuela-style outcome, the bookie's current favourite to succeed Khamenei is his son Mojtaba.
The big problems with the regime change style strike were A, we killed a bunch of the immediate successors, and B, unlike Venezuela, Iran is full of people who have deep, passionate convictions and aren't just a bunch of grifter, drug-dealing cartel lords, you know? Basically, everyone in power in Venezuela is just like a guy. They're just there to make their money off of their part on the narco chain, whereas Iran is, you know, a country full of people with beliefs and passions, some of whom are even leaders.
Has a reputation for being both more hardline and, unfortunately for ordinary Iranians...
Oh, they do also acknowledge the existential threat, yeah. Iran has always been correct on this. Israel, as it exists right now, is an existential threat to Iran. As long as Israel exists, Iran's people cannot be safe. That is true. Venezuela isn't really under the same kind of existential threat from America. Like, once we put our boot down on Venezuela, they're more or less safe from us. I'm speaking very generally. Once we've, you know, subjugated Venezuela, we kind of stopped paying attention to them. We literally just did, you know? We did an operation, we killed some people, we kidnapped their president, and now it's like, okay, it's yesterday's news. But Israel will never let Iran see peace. So, from Iran's perspective, they have to fight back. They can't just weather a little regime change and then, oh, everything will be okay.
Less competent, and will presumably be unwilling to do any sort of deal with the people who just assassinated his father. Moreover, on Wednesday morning, Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, announced that any new leader of the Iranian regime would be, quote, an unequivocal...
Iran learned a lot of their tactics from the DPRK for avoiding and sustaining Western strikes. North Korea was the last place the Ayatollah visited before he took power. Well, North Korea has been completely vindicated. North Korea is a pariah state, completely outside of the Western hegemony's, or the Western hegemon's sphere of power, and nobody fucks with them because they have nukes. The lesson that needs to be learned here is get nukes. Get nukes as quickly as possible. You have to get nukes as quickly as you can. Get nukes and ICBMs. They're the only thing that you can, it's the only thing you can do to protect yourself. I'm doing it right now. Good. Okay, good. Yeah. Nukes, rice, and beans. Nukes, rice, and beans. Nukes, rice, and beans. We stand North Korea? Well, no. The regime is incredibly evil, but in terms of resisting foreign power, like, you have to do that. I'm just saying the strat works.
Target for elimination, no matter what his name is, which does seem to functionally preclude a Venezuela-style outcome. So, on the question of protests instead, while the regime is still incredibly unpopular, Khamenei's death seems to have mobilized the minority of Iranians that still support it. And at least
South Korea stayed isolationist without nukes. South Korea was ruled by a fascist dictator that was appointed by America. So he wasn't really... They weren't really at risk of being fucked with by America because we had already fucked with them.
Judging by videos on social media, the pro-regime protests, or at least the anti-Israel/America protests, look a lot bigger than the anti-regime ones at the moment. While it's obviously very difficult to properly gauge sentiment inside Iran, there have been numerous reports that the severity of the ongoing bombing campaign, which has already included strikes on a primary school and a hospital, has stoked anti-American and anti-Israel sentiment.
Who could have... No way, dog. Really? That's crazy. Sorry, I'm not making fun of TLDR news. I'm just reacting. I'm a live streamer. It's my job. I'm like a monkey in a cage. You know, I'm getting whipped by the guy behind me. The guy behind me is my viewers. Who could have guessed that massacring schoolgirls would be... It was us, and we did it on day one, man. Day fucking one. Like, literally rolling dice. What's the most evil thing we could do day one? I have an idea. I'm not sure you're right about Israel and Iran. Before the revolution, they were on friendly terms. That was a very different world. 50 years ago, Israel was nowhere near as emboldened as they are right now, and America did a better job of reining them in. Also, before the revolution, Iran was kind of a puppet state of the West. Like, the Shah was a Western-friendly puppet dictator. So, yeah, the dynamic was different. That being said, though, and I mean this, even if we could somehow magically put a Shah in charge of Iran again, and there wasn't a whole bunch of regional instability, Israel would keep wanting to fight with them. Look at what's happening right now in Lebanon and in Syria. Syria has been taken over by a Islamist, yes, but relatively rational Arab regime that's on friendly terms with the White House. Al-Jolani met and shook President Trump's hand. And what is Israel doing? Continuing to bomb them, continuing to threaten them. They're threatening to invade Lebanon. For why? Why? No reason. They're bombing Beirut. Why? No reason. It's just fun. It just did that, you know? This is not the Israel of the 1970s. Not to suggest that Israel back then was good, but, like, they have gotten much more arrogant. Much more arrogant. Yeah, but that's because they're in Greater Israel. Yeah, but keep in mind that, like, this is what fascist regimes do. The Germans did the same thing with their myth of national expansion, you know? The Germans talked about Lebensraum. They talked about annexing the Sudetenland and annexing Austria to reclaim the greater borders of the Aryan Empire. But then, almost as soon as they had achieved those goals, they did annex the Sudetenland, they did annex Austria, all of a sudden, ethnic Germans on the western border of Poland were under threat, you know? It's always more. Always more. And the same thing would happen with Greater Israel. There is no world in which Israel takes a bite out of all their neighboring countries, gets the Greater Israel borders, and then they're like, oh, we're done. I know we just declared war on like 8 neighboring countries, but we're done. They will never stop. Look at segregation within Israel. Damn. Jewish/Muslim segregation in Israel is unlike anything seen anywhere in the US within living memory. Israeli Jews are around 7 times more likely to have 0 Muslim neighbors than white Americans are to have 0 black neighbors. For Israeli Muslims versus black Americans, it's around 78 times. God damn. That's quite a way to frame the data. And they say it's not apartheid, by the way. So is Afghanistan and Pakistan just doing their own thing right now, just having fun? Yes. Pakistan and Afghanistan right now are fighting over who can be the best jihadist. They're having a competition to see who can they're competing over which country is more controlled by Islamic terrorists. And you would think it would be Afghanistan because they're literally controlled by the Taliban, but Pakistan is putting up a fight. They're putting up a fight. They're having a jihad off, exactly.
Which might plausibly make ordinary Iranians less likely to heed Trump's calls for protests. Again, maybe it's too early to be pessimistic. Trump has advised that protesters wait until the war is over before trying their luck. And it's worth noting that if Mujtaba does indeed succeed his father, in the medium to long term, this will probably make the regime's demise more likely, given Mujtaba's apparent incompetence and the fact that things didn't end too brilliantly for Iran's last hereditary leader. Nonetheless, it's at least true.
What do you think of the fact that the IRGC is far more set up to resist a ground invasion than a sustained air campaign? Well, of course, yeah. It's always easier to fight back against troops on the ground than it is to fight back against, like, a hail of missiles and drones fired from hundreds of miles away. If Americans launch a ground invasion of Iran, it will be bad for us. Because you need very advanced weaponry to take care of America's jets and bombers and missiles, but you do not need advanced weaponry to take care of the meaty flesh bodies of U.S. servicemen.
That neither a more pliant successor nor a protest-induced regime change look likely in the short term. So given no clean outcome looks immediately forthcoming, in the past couple of days, journalists have started asking the administration how long they expect the war to go on for. This was a question put to Hegseth on Monday, and this was his response.
No, but we're not going to go into the exercise of what we will or will not do. I think it's one of those fallacies for a long time that this department or presidents or others should tell the American people, and our enemies, by the way, here's exactly what we'll do. Here's exactly how long we'll go. Here's exactly how far we'll go. Here's what we're willing to do and not do. It's foolishness. And so President Trump ensures that our enemies...
Communicating our strategic objectives to the press? What are we, fucking stupid? Nice try, pressman. You're not getting anything out of me. I'm just here to aura farm and tell you how based and epic our Operation Epic Chungus is going.
Understand, we'll go as far as we need to go to advance American interests.
Nice
but we're
try,
not dumb about
Fed.
it. You don't have to roll 200,000 people in there and stay for 20 years.
Hegseth didn't give us...
You don't have to send 20,000 people in there and stay for 20 years. What about less than 20 years? That's a very high bar you just set for what we're not going to do.
Specific time frame, and basically said that the war could continue until the US had executed what it needs. This puts pressure on the administration to more clearly articulate its military objectives in Iran, and Trump duly laid them out in a press conference a day later. According to Trump, the US has 4 military objectives in Iran: destroy Iran's missile capabilities, annihilate their navy, ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon, and ensure that Iran cannot arm, fund, and direct proxies outside of Iran. These are some pretty maximalist objectives.
Yeah?
Taken together, they basically imply Iran's total demilitarization and will probably require the Iranian regime to essentially surrender. The problem here, however, is that history suggests that air power alone isn't sufficient for such maximalist objectives. Air campaigns often achieve impressive tactical success, but there aren't many examples of air campaigns achieving big strategic objectives. In fact, according to historian Robert Pape, who wrote his seminal book on the topic called Bombing to Win, air power alone has never toppled a government, even when paired with intelligence, and very rarely achieves meaningful political change. Perhaps the closest parallel to today is the 1991 air campaign against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Much like today, at the time, George H.W. Bush was calling on the Iraqi people to rise up and encouraging Kurdish rebels in the north.
Everything we're doing now, we've done before, man. Everything we've done before. The Blitz was a prime example. Yeah, we've known since World War II, strategic bombing just doesn't work. Strategic bombing was basically invented in World War II. It was the first time we had the ability to do it. You know, it's not like World War I planes could really indiscriminately bomb population centers. They were these little biplanes flying 100 feet above the ground. Bombing back then was like a guy in the pilot seat throwing a stick grenade down. But in World War II, we tried it. Nazis did it with London. We did it with, well, a couple of German cities. Didn't really do anything. Mostly just makes people upset. as you can imagine, because we're like killing a bunch of them.
But a brief uprising was brutally repressed. The Iraqi regime survived, and Saddam was only ousted when the US staged a ground invasion in 2001. The US and Israel already seem to have tacitly realized this, which is why they're apparently trying to convince Kurdish militias in Iraq to stage a ground invasion. And there was even a report in a Saudi news outlet earlier this week that Israeli special forces entered Iran on Monday night. But if neither Kurdish militias nor Israeli special forces prove sufficient, a US ground invasion will probably emerge as the only way for Trump to achieve his maximalist objectives. Now, to be clear, we're not saying that this is definitely going to happen, and the odds are still probably below 50%. It's still very possible that the regime crumbles or is overthrown, or that Iran descends into a messy civil war. It's also worth noting that Iran is incredibly difficult to invade.
That's probably the best case scenario for the Trump administration at this point, which would be turning Iran into a failed state. Basically just fracturing it into a bunch of divided, like, ethnic regions and political, you have the Islamists and the seculars and so on, and just hoping that the country falls apart completely, which would create like 50 new ISISes, by the way, but that's probably the most that they're hoping for right now. Israel would love that. Oh, I'm sure. It would destabilize the region in an unprecedented way. It might even be worse than ISIS forming in the wake of our invasion of Iraq. Like, it could end up being significantly worse. And yes, it would create a greater refugee crisis than I think the world has seen, than the modern world has seen. I can't think of any other. I mean, Iran is like 100 million people. Syria has a much smaller population. I don't know.
It's a massive country covered in mountains. It's also possible that the regime survives, but Trump just decides to withdraw anyway, and blame it on ordinary Iranians for not protesting hard enough. Nonetheless, the odds of boots on the ground are at least higher than they were a few weeks ago, and it would be a remarkable U-turn from a president who rose to political prominence criticizing forever wars. As we mentioned earlier, the latest issue of our magazine, Too Long, is out very soon. And if you subscribe using
Okay. Well, I think it's a good video. It's just insane to think that we're here. To add to the Iranian regime's flexibility in war leadership, it's so difficult for America and for Israel to win this because they can't just defeat the Iranian military. They have to suppress subsequent insurgency. And they have so many soft targets in the region. For Iran, their viable targets extend from like Greece to Turkey to Saudi Arabia to Kuwait to the UAE to like the Iranian, like post-Iranian government collapse insurgency could viably target basically every neighboring state. In Egypt, England, if they can reach it, they could target everyone. And we're talking about millions and millions of potential insurgents. What do you do about that? Very difficult to imagine. The same reason the West couldn't fully colonize China in the 19th century. It's a lot of people. Just tough to do. Trust me, if the West had a bomb that could quietly vaporize all life in Iran, they would have dropped it already. Nuclear fallout is probably the only reason they haven't gone that route. If they could just snap their fingers and eliminate 90 million people, they would have done so. We would have already done so to every country in Israel's way. I'm not going to lie, I can't even really imagine what a ground invasion of Iran would look like. Like, it's a very, very, very big country, and it looks like this. I mean, this is an exaggerated relief map, but still, this is what it looks like. So I can't really imagine what you would have to airdrop everyone in. It'd be like a meat grinder. It's not even just the way the country is laid out topographically. It's also like, okay, I don't want to sound too video gamey when I say this because I think there is a legitimate point to be made here. There was a shot towards the end of this that I wanted to return to because I saw it and I was thinking of it. Where was it? It was a shot of the Iranian urban landscape, and I wanted to look at it because it was a phenomenal reminder of how difficult this place would be to occupy. Damn, I can't quite find it. Oh, here we go. That's what I was thinking of. Look at that. Just Imagine this, but stretching on for miles and miles and miles. It's you have everything is going wrong for you here, right? You not only have like very dense hills and mountains, you also have layered, interconnected streets in cities of millions of people. You have basically no like forest coverage in most areas, meaning that there's no place to really hide except in the buildings. It's looks like Southern California. Well, I wouldn't want to invade Los Angeles either. Iran has a ton of canyons too. Can you imagine being a US soldier and trying to make your way from this street right here to this building right here? Look at how many ways you could be killed on the way over there. Just imagine like the mental state. This would be a ruinous ground invasion. Ruinous. It would be awful. Can Iran just straight up win this? Well, Iran can't touch us, of course. If we did a ground invasion, it would probably be like pretty bad for us. Right now, it seems like this is what Hegseth and Trump are kind of like leaning in the direction of. The only problem here, I think, is that I don't know if the Pentagon would allow it to happen. We know the Pentagon was not super happy with this invasion to begin with, but I have a feeling that cooler heads might prevail here, because the Pentagon might be willing to go along with a decapitation strike and indiscriminate bombing campaign, but would they be willing to co-sign this? I don't know. Is Rubio in favor? No, but Hegseth is. Rubio is against all of this, which makes sense because Rubio is incredibly evil, but he's not completely insane. Hegseth is completely insane. 100, just juiced up, freak Christian evangelical end times believer, absolute lunatic. Yeah, with support for the invasion of Iran already this low, and it is really, really, really low. I just don't know. That's such a hard target, you know? That's such a hard target. It's the hardest target imaginable. Will they use nukes? I don't think we can really use nukes, no. Not for moral reasons, but for political reasons. The United States using nukes in Iran might be the flag that our tentative allies need to finally pull the trigger and stop dealing with us. It won't help here either. That is also true. We could nuke Iran. It wouldn't actually. Nukes aren't magic. Nukes are a big bomb that leaves radiation. A couple of bombs, you would need multiple just to take out Tehran. And even then, we're talking spotty coverage. And environmental reasons, the radiation might blow back over here. Whoa, hold on now. If the wind blows the radiation west, you might talk me into supporting this. Just a little southwest? Southwest west? Do you think we could get? I don't know. Maybe not such a bad idea. Hit Dubai and Israel. The fucking dual like Gulf Stream right there, waiting for the perfect wind conditions, calculating, getting all of the NOAA's computers on this. We need to drop it at the exact right time. It's the only way. Neighboring nations would be hit with radiation for sure. They probably deserve it.